Welcome back to the show. And that was definitely an interesting conversation with Sister Dana about the situation there in Syria. On another note, we're going to be talking to Sister Shamim Akhalwaya, who is the elder sister to Marhoom Yusuf Akhalwaya and the younger brother to Marhoom Yusuf Akhalwaya, Ismail Akhalwaya. Now, just let me give you a little bit of brief about the situation. Yusuf Akhalwaya was a young South African activist who lost his life in the struggle against apartheid. He was a member of the Amatimol unit of Umkhonto Sizwe, the armed wing of the African National Congress. Tragically, Yusuf was killed on December the 11th, 1989, along with his comrade Prakash Napier, when a limpet mine they were carrying detonated prematurely. And today we're going to be talking to them about this particular aspect. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much, Shamim and Ismail, for joining us on the show today. Let's go to you, Ismail. Talk to us about Yusuf and, of course, where you're at right now with the situation, with, of course, taking place. We're going to say that there was a statement from the Akhalwaya family, and we wanted to just give the viewers some more insight with regard to this.
Thanks. Alaikum salam. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah. I think in our statement, we expressed the view that, 11th December, which is, I think, this week, marks 35 years since the passing of Yusuf, but together with his comrade Prakash Napier. And as a family, this time of the year brings about mixed feelings. We recall the pain and suffering that many close family members, my mum, his daughter Isa, as well as his young wife at the time, Farhana, had to endure. And on the one hand, I think it's a painful memory, but we also recognize the fact that they were extremely brave, courageous, committed young South Africans who wanted to bring about democracy in our country, and ultimately paid the ultimate sacrifice. So I think they're not alone. There are hundreds, thousands of young South Africans who joined the struggle, who perished under suspicious circumstances. And I think we owe them all for the democracy we have today and the ability that we can express our views freely in a democratic South Africa. So I think, that is the view of the family at the moment. Yes, we mourn the passing of Prakash and Yusuf, but we recognize that their contribution and their commitment to South Africa lives on in all of us. Thanks.
Most definitely, Shamim, I'm going to come to you there. And I echo that sentiments where you say that, he's left his legacy. They both have left their legacies behind, but of course stood for a cause that meant something. And we see today, I think that we can look at them as martyrs in the sense and heroes because they stood for a noble cause. And I think that that's what we want to talk about today, Shamim. It wasn't an easy situation to go through. Seeing the deaths of these two people has definitely had an impact on the family as such. And going through that and coming to this inquest that has now taken place is, I think, opening up that can of worms where you're definitely going through those emotions again. It's not easy to speak about that kind of grief.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I want to just start by saying at the onset that I don't think we're going to go into, and I feel like if you could just respect that the inquest is ongoing, or the appeal for an inquest is at the courts at the moment, and we wouldn't like to discuss any of that right now. I think for us, it's just their memories and what they stood for that is important, and that we want to see live on in our families, in young South Africans, etc. I think what is also very crucial is, I see we're talking about my brother, Marhoom Yusuf Akhalwaya, but for us as a family, we've always seen Yusuf and Prakash as one. And I think that for us was so special in this relationship that they had. They came from very different backgrounds. Prakash was a worker and a shop steward for for a COSATU union at that time. Yusuf was a student. Yusuf had very strong, his influence in terms of Islam and the need for justice and humanity and freedom from oppression were very strong and foremost in the person that he was. And I think Prakash, being Hindu and coming from a different background completely, still found common cause in fighting against the unjust system that we faced. Also, not to forget that Jamil was also there as a young man, and one cannot begin to imagine the trauma that he would have endured, losing two of his comrades, in fact, right in front of his eyes. I mean, how does one live through that kind of trauma? So yes, for me, Yusuf, as I said, had very firm beliefs, and for him, I just want to quote two of the. I mean, years ago, I think he was 19 at the time. He had a little book of sayings in which he had written some of his thoughts, etc. And in that particular book, he said, Islam is peace and war, peace for justice and against injustice. Another thing which was quite remarkable for him at that age was that he said, Islam is the gun, jihad is the bullet, and oppression the target. So I just wanted to bring that to the fore, because I think his views were based very firmly in his understanding of Islam. And he was the Amir at the MSA. He was elected in 1987 at FITS, and also a member of the Call of Islam, as well as the Black Students Society.
Right. Okay, coming to you, Brother Ismail. Yusuf has left many, and Prakash have left many legacies. And we do know, I mean, everyone has played a part in apartheid, but I think some of the people stand out more in that sense. Talk to us about the impact that he's had on the communities and the legacy that he's left behind.
Well, I think, as my sister is saying, I think from a family, he's obviously made an impression and left an impression amongst family as well as friends. Yusuf was someone who was unassuming, who was quiet, who, was an ordinary youngster growing up in Lenasia, going to Nirvana school, being involved in the soccer fields. So I think many of his peers, many of his friends were kind of shocked when they heard that he was involved. I, as a younger brother, was also didn't know the state of his involvement, and that owes to the discipline that he basically portrayed. I think on the larger community, I'm sure. I think his name. There are hundreds of names that pop up of people who paid the ultimate sacrifice, and it's difficult to zoom in to say that he was more special than anyone else. But I think collectively we basically understand that him, together with hundreds of young people, were forced to take this decision, to take up arms, to risk everything, so I think we should recognize his, Prakash's, but hundreds of others in South Africa. And as I've said before, we have the democracy we have today. We have the freedom of speech. We can elect who we want. There's a vibrant social, civil society. Media is free. I mean, a forum like this would never, ever have existed under apartheid. And I think all of those things are due to the fact of the sacrifices many thousands have made. And I think we should not ever forget what it took to get us to where we are today and the South Africa we are in today. I think the one thing we must marvel on, which I think people disregard, is the fact that we have absolute freedom of religion in this country. And I don't think there's anywhere else in the world where you have this level of freedom of religion. And I think that's testimony to the struggle. The struggle was a cross-sector, cross-religious. Um, it involved everyone, every race, gender.
Most definitely.
There were worker struggles, everything, students, everything. So yeah, I think in that context, we should remember
In
it.
that context, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you look at the different religions that have come together in that particular period, it wasn't about that. It was about fighting for a particular cause that mattered and for the freedom of the people of South Africa. And I think that's what mattered is I think everybody realized that there was a deeper purpose for them to be able to take that stand. And today we're sitting here literally, and as you say, because of these particular people that have taken a harder stand than some of us, all of us had played a piece in apartheid. But I mean, there are some people, like I said, that stand out. Shamim, for you, what is it the thing is, I'd like people to understand Yusuf and Prakash, what it meant for them to go out there and, stand, because you have to have resilience in this type of situation. There were many people that had that resilience, that stood their ground and said, we're going to definitely be a free country. I mean, we're looking at Palestine right now and we see the genocide taking place. And we just thank Allah that we as South Africans stood together and took that stand and made those differences. And I think that is where people like Yusuf and Prakash have come in, and we can look at them and say they definitely stood ground for the people of South Africa.
Yes, I think that's an important point. And I think there were many events that unfolded around the time that Yusuf and Prakash were both young men. Growing up in Lenasia, firstly, it was the fight against the tricameral system that was front and center and which they participated in as young people. But also, it was the 1980 school boycotts. I was then in standard, well, we still went with standards. I was in standard 8 and Yusuf in standard 6. And when the boycotts broke out, I mean, both of us had family in the Cape, and family in Bosmont and Nuclear, and they had all come out to support the school boycotts of 1980. And I think we didn't think twice about participating and getting out of class and joining the boycotts. And I think that was really significant because I think that was really the process that started our awareness in education. And looking and facing police brutality at that time, banning of meetings, etc. And I think Prakash had that similar experience, being at a different school, but still having to face that repression, being chased by cops when you are out on the streets, etc. And I think later on, Prakash, as a unionist, was also faced that kind of brutality because it was at that time when the South African Railways workers' strike was on, and I actually was working at Cosatu House. And
Right.
at that particular point, Cosatu House was under siege. First, I mean, these cops and military came in and basically threw everything or turned everything upside down in a raid which lasted from the afternoon into the early evening. And at that stage, Prakash would travel with us because he worked a few blocks away and was a union representative. So him and my husband waited outside while I was in the building for a good few hours. And Prakash did not want to leave and carry on until he knew I was safe. So I think it was all those actions, the brutality with the Goniwe and the others who were killed so brutally. It was further back that we heard of and knew of how Ahmed Timor, Barbara Saluji, the Mkenges, all these people who faced police brutality and were eventually killed, that actually inspired and motivated people like Yusuf, Prakash, and
I think
Jamil to
I'm going to
actually
come in there and say I
eventually.
think it was the unity that everybody had within them. It was
Yes.
saying, let us get united, let's get resilient, and together we're going to make a difference. Very quickly, Ismail, do you think that the people in Indonesia have seen the impacts of these kinds of people like Yusuf and Prakash that have stood for that, and now that we have our freedom, we have all these people to be grateful for?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I think in the early days, I mean, after their passing, we had a very successful sports tournament in Indonesia that recognized their contribution, but also paid homage to others who sacrificed. But I think as we go along, the democracy, people are now very comfortable with democracy. Yes, there are problems. I don't think we must shy away from the challenges we have in the country. But I think every day, I think we have our own struggles and our own dailies. So these things fade into memory. But I think it's important to kind of bring about this history, especially for
Yes.
youngsters. And I think you were drawing parallels to Palestine as well. And I think
Yes.
I don't think we're going through a tenth of what they are going through, but there are youngsters there that are taken up and basically history itself. We should not forget what happened, and
Yeah.
these things
So
repeat
let me
itself
let me
in
just
other
come in
parts
there
of
and
the world.
say I think what has happened is people like Yusuf Prakash and as you mentioned the other star activists have definitely left their mark and their legacies behind for younger people now to be able to follow through and say how resilient can we be, how united can we be as a community, and of course as a united South Africa, and take agendas forward. And I think this is what they stood for, is for us to look at them as role models in those fields, to be able to understand what is required for us to be able to overcome issues and challenges. And I think we need to commend them and we need to pay tribute to them and make, as you said, the younger people understand what these role models really stood for. So Jazakallah so much for joining us.
Can I just
They
say there's also
definitely,
struggles? Yeah. Can I just say there's also struggles in daily life, whether it's ecology, whether it's environment, whether it's global issues, corruption. So youth should continuously get involved in all of this. The struggle doesn't stop.
most definitely. I think the message that we'd like to leave behind, I think from both of you today, is that they were phenomenal human beings in their own right, contributing in their very own way to be able to create those differences. And of course, entice others to be able to say, let's take a stand for this apartheid regime that we're in and let us overcome it together. And I think that's what matters. We all should be really grateful for all these people, because that's where we're at today, is literally in the space of freedom and freedom of speech and freedom of everything in South Africa, literally just due to these people taking those extra stands that we required. So, Alhamdulillah, thank you so much. Ismail, you mentioned that you recognize the freedom of religion that we enjoy today. And I think that is also an important factor to bring to the fore. We have it today literally just because of that. So, Jazakallah so much for joining us. I think we've definitely made some impact with this. And, we our duas go and sentiments with the families of all these activists that have taken a role in making a major stand for our freedom today. So Jazakallah so much for joining us and penning out, of course, the characteristics of these people that we can use going forward. And as you said, not just in the apartheid regime environment, but in our everyday lives as well. Thank you so much, Jazakallah. Take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you for having us.
It's
Thanks.
a pleasure. And that was, of course, Shamim Akhalwaya and Ismail Akhalwaya penning out the stories of Yusuf and Prakash Akhalwaya, Prakash Napier, definitely making a difference. And that's what we're saying. It's time to stand and take a stand with resilience and stand with unity. And, of course, the freedom of religion that we're facing now. These are the things that are important. Stick with us. We'll be back with you in a sec.